Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Rogue Deck Chronicles. I am Dean, and once again, I have Devin with me.
Hey guys, hopefully everyone had a good weekend. And honestly, Dean, I am super excited to talk about what happened over the weekend in Pokemon trading card game.
Oh, there's so much that happened since last time we recorded, and there's even some topics that we don't even have on our docket that impacted the community, like the updates to live. There's a lot of quality of life updates, so if you have a chance, go try out how they are. They're just little things here and there, but it reminds me of how the online client, when we have Pokemon trading card game online, they brought some of those features into the live client, so it's really fun. And then on our agenda for today, we'll talk about some major tournaments that happened. There was the Champions League in Japan, which played in the post rotation meta. So we'll take a look at those results. But also in the TPCI realm, we had a special event in Puerto Rico. So we'll talk about that as well, and then how that and Merida do those results impact EUIC? That's right. There's a international competition this weekend too. We'll give our 2 cents on what's going to go on with that, and then we'll continue our How to Train a Rogue series, talking about how item cards play a role in your deck. Then lead into our Rogue deck of the week, and then we may talk a little bit about Pokemon Day. So we have a nice, fun-filled episode for you. But before we go into anything, Devin,
Hmm.
how has your week been with Pokemon?
Very interesting. Um, Over the weekend, even still happening right now in the shiny hunting community, is Shiny Alpha Week. So I did 3 streams just shiny hunting for Alpha Empoleon in Pokemon Legends Arceus. So that was interesting. Pokemon Go is gearing up for the end of its season, and it's kind of its capstone event, which goes pairs up with Pokemon Day and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of different like kind of video game, non-trading card game stuff is what I focused on over the weekend. And honestly, the next 2 weeks is going to be Pokemon overload because obviously Pokemon Day is next week.
Mm-hmm.
And this weekend, we already talked about EUICs this weekend, but it's also the beginning of Pokemon uh, Go events in terms of Univitor. So that is ramping up in Pokemon Go. So it's a lot's going to happen soon. And Pokemon itself is going to be very, very thin, very, very spread out over the entire globe this weekend. It's going to be kind of fun to see.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch this weekend with EUIC, and I know a couple people at that tournament, so I'm going to be cheering them on. I know last week we actually did something fun at League. I saw a video from a big name YouTube content creator in our realm, and bulk uh we did bulk deck building. So we
I
had our
saw that
professor.
video on YouTube the other night and I showed Kristen. I go, "This is what Dean did." And she's like, "I don't get it." I go, "You just basically dig through a whole bunch of cards and you have like you give yourself a time limit, build a deck based on a whole bunch of cards just thrown at you." And it seems fun, especially if you know the card pool.
Yeah, so if you're going in completely blind, it's very overwhelming, especially with the time limit, because we did the 30-minute time limit like they did in that video. Um, Obviously, it was a much smaller size of the bulk. He only had like maybe a tenth of what that video had, but it was still plenty enough for me, him, and like two other people. And just going through and trying to like get your strategy, it was very, very fun. The series that we're doing, actually, a lot, all those concepts helped me out creating a fun psychic deck. But I also forgot about Ball Search, which we just talked about the day of we did that. And I'm like, oh, I have no way to get my Pokemon. But luckily, I put in like Buddy-Buddy Poffin, and I found some mysterious treasure.
I would say you
So
picked the one type that doesn't actually need traditional ball search. So
yeah, so I got fortunate with that. So it was very fun. I didn't do the GLC tournament because of it, but I had a very, very enjoyable time at League. We're we're thinking about implementing this on a much larger scale and do it as a night. So we're in talks about finding the logistics behind that and seeing if we can get enough bulk for it. So that was my week Pokemon. Also trying to get ready for a couple tournaments coming up locally for me. But another big thing that you and I have been working on is, ta-da! We got webcams.
I would say elephant in the room, right?
So this is something Devin and I have been talking about for a little bit. I had to actually buy a webcam that worked. My equipment was older. And so this is our first episode where you can see our faces, so you can get to know who we are. Definitely tell we're brothers. So
yeah, just a little bit.
See that. So hopefully you all like this. Let us know if there's any tweaks that from the video and the overlay and all that may you may like to see. We'll talk between me and Devin about that. But yeah, we're excited to debut this on this week's episode. Obviously, I need to work on my background. I don't really have much in my office, but
I'll say you don't have a whole bunch of pops behind you and some plushies in the ground like I do.
I'm lucky enough to have those three things, so I need to buy some more wall decor. I've already reached out to our buddy Joe. I'm like, hey, do you have any like Pokemon decor just lying around that you don't want anymore? So I'm in the process of decorating, so there's that.
Yeah, so for those who like can kind of peel back the curtain, right? When we had brought this idea up, I go, you do know your background has to be like kind of clean. And he did it. Like, he showed me like his background one day. I'm like, yeah, you need to clean your office, dude. Like, we're not doing this if you have a messy office. He goes, yeah, give me a couple weeks on that. So it's something we've been talking about, kind of poking fun and having fun with it. But it's going to be hopefully a better experience for you guys. We obviously have a more visual presence that for those who are more of a visual learner and a kind of, we've tried our best to read the cards. We try our best to describe the cards. Sometimes you just need a visual representation for those who are those visual learners. So we're going to try to bring that to the episodes going forward. But with all the housekeeping and everything out of the way, Dean, let's talk about Puerto Rico. Let's talk about.
I think before we do Puerto Rico, I think we need to talk about Japan.
You want to talk? Okay. I didn't think we wanted to go to the future format first, but we can do that. So
I have a method to my madness. So
okay, so what happened in Japan this weekend?
So there was a Champions League in Fukuoka. I can never pronounce the Japanese towns.
I would say you're going somewhere very soon, and you need to learn these Japanese cities.
I know what I need to know.
Okay.
Put it that way. But so there was a Champions League. So a couple notable things with this tournament is that, one, it's post-rotation. So this is the first glimpse of us seeing the Journey Together. I say that in quotes because they're not called Journey Together. They're called Battle Partners, I believe.
Yeah, this one's their Battle Partner set, yeah.
Yeah, so but it's our Journey Together set. So a nice glimpse of seeing what Atlanta Regional will be like, potentially. 5,000 players.
Yeah.
So we knew Japan had massive tournaments, but that is knocking it out. Like, put in perspective, we kind of talked about EUIC a little bit already. EUIC is only about 3,100 players, and that's the biggest tournament in TPCI ever. This is 5,000, and this isn't the biggest Japan tournament ever. This is
this is on the lower end, if I'm not mistaken. Like, the Champions League definitely are very, like, because they only have so many of these a year.
They do 4 a year, yeah.
Yeah, this is like their internets effectively, because they don't have traditional regional systems like we do. So this is very much a big deal, and the player base is very, very important because obviously it's Japan. It's also just the fact that this is another way for them to qualify for Worlds.
Yeah, and with that, I think it's a good time to bring up that for Japanese players, this is one of the few ways for them to go to Worlds. So having non-Japanese players at these tournaments doesn't really happen a lot, but there was a lot of notable Western players, or at least a handful of Western players at this tournament,
Mm-hmm.
being Rahul Reddy and Tord Reckliffe are the two main people that actually made day two at this big tournament, with Tord Reckliffe getting top 16, making top cut at his first Japanese tournament.
Yeah, and
So
he obviously, if you look at on Limitless, he's the only non-Japanese player on the top 16 lists, and
yeah,
he's playing a deck that a lot of other players were testing for this format. So obviously, he is testing ahead. Um, he had an opportunity to qualify for Worlds directly through this tournament, but also he was invited to this tournament, and because of his performance, he's actually given an invite to come back.
yeah. So those who don't know, if you go, I believe, greater than 10 wins going into day two, you have an automatic invitation back to the next Champions League. So obviously, Tor Ratcliffe did that, making top cut, and then Rahul Reddy did that as well. He went 12-3.
Mm-hmm.
So those two players will be at the next Champions League in a couple months.
And they're best of one series, if I'm not mistaken. They're not best of three.
The whole entire tournament's best of one.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, and they can change decks between day one and day two.
Yeah, because each day is a different tournament for them. Very similar to how in the Worlds each day is a different tournament.
Kind of. They've changed that a little bit recently. But I remember when I first got in the game, there was like the qualifier day, and then when you make it into the actual tournament day, you can change your deck.
Yeah,
Same
so
thing with Japan. You go through and you actually get a qualifier placard, and then you're allowed to change your deck. So a lot of people will not. I wouldn't say a lot of people change their deck completely, but they will modify based on what they saw from day one.
mm-hmm.
And one thing that Rahul Reddy talked about was that if I would have took that opportunity again, I would have changed like one card. One of it would have been a cornerstone Oripon in their deck, because him and Tor played the same 60. They actually play tested with each other, and they were on this Ogerpon box. That's kind of what it's called, or a Tera box.
Yeah, it's knocked out Tera Box, I think is what it's being dubbed as. And they weren't the only ones that
Yeah.
played this deck. I'm looking at the top 16 right now, and that deck has three of the top 16 spots. So it wasn't a deck that came out like that was a secret brew or anything like that. This was a fairly well known concept. Um, Really, if you boil down the deck in its bare principles, you're using the Knocked Owl to set up your Terra Pokemon, and you have Teal Mask Ogerpon, Wellspring Ogerpon, you have
Mm-hmm.
Pikachu EX, you have Lily's Clefairy. I'm gonna assume Lily's Clefairy is there purely for any dragons they see, but also it's a
Yep.
good attacker because it just does damage based on bench size. And then you have Latias EX to kind of just rotate your attackers freely, free retreat. So it's very much like I said, it's a box. It's a boxy deck. It is you have your three or four kind of primary strategies or primary attackers that you want to do, but it's really much a react to what's flipped over in front of you turn one, turn two, and then just choose the best option for the match.
Exactly. Yeah. And Tor was actually on stream on day two for his winning in. And the only clip I saw, because I was asleep at that point, is the time difference. But I
I'd say
did watch a
there's
little bit of day one and day two. I saw it was the very end, and he got Iono to 2 cards, and he needed 2 specific cards to win. And then he drew his top deck was the Ursaluna, the Blood Moon Ursaluna
uh-huh.
EX. He had a Psychic Energy in hand. He already had the Latias in play. He literally just dropped everything, retreated and attacked, and the guy was like, "Yep, you got me. You got the 2 cards you needed to win, and Toward you just had that luck, and
Yeah.
that solidified him to make top cut at this tournament." So there was that, but the deck that won it all is Feraligatr.
Yeah, I mean, you've been talking about this deck for a couple weeks, like to me about how it's like kind of sneaky, it's fun, and honestly, looking into the cards a little bit more, I'm like, wow, this is a deck that budget players will love. So if you're getting new and you have, because and you're getting these cards, it's not going to be a hard deck to put together. Like the most expensive card is a Milotic EX.
Yeah, and it's like a $2-3 card. Which, if I were y'all, I will buy this card now because spoiler alert, Melodic EX did phenomenal. Not just in this deck, but there was a lot of wall archetypes because Manaphy rotates, and they just took advantage of this format. But yeah, as you mentioned, this is a very cheap deck, and this list that won, there were no new cards in there. You can build this right now and take it to a local challenge and play
Mhm.
it as is.
Yeah, and for those who don't know how like the engine of this deck works, so Feraligatr is a stage 2 water type Pokemon. It only has 180 HP, but it's a single prize attacker. And it has the ability Torrential Heart. Once during your turn, you may put 5 damage counters on this Pokemon. If you do, during this turn, attacks done by this Pokemon do 120 more damage. And then it has the attack for 2 Water Energy Giant Wave, does 160, but during your next turn, you can't use Giant Wave. But what makes this really, really good is not its actual attack, right? Giant Wave for 280, great. Clean up some KOs here and there. But it's the Relicanth from Temporal Forces with the Memory Dive ability that allows it throughout the game to just pick and choose which attack it wants to do.
Yeah, and that's important because the Crocodile has a hidden run attack, and then the Total Dial actually has a retreat lock attack. So depending
Mm-hmm.
on the situation, you have 3 great attacks to use from, and you're hitting big with each one.
Yeah.
And you may say, like, okay, well, that's cool and all, but you're putting damage on your Feraligatr. Like, you're just making it easy to get it knocked out. Well, that's true. It's a single prize deck, so if it does get knocked out, it doesn't really mind that. But it's paired off with Monkey Dory. So you use the Torrential Heart ability, and then you have 1 or 2 Monkey Dories in play, and you just get all that damage off and spread it on your opponent's board. And the goal is not really take any prize cards until the very end. You want to be behind because you play a bunch of counter catchers and ways to come back from behind,
Mm-hmm.
and then just take an explosive end game attack and get all 4 to 6 prize cards at once.
And then there's a combination. I was looking at the list that is not to be overlooked is the fact that the Phoebus used in this deck is the Flail Phoebus. So Phoebus attack says does 10 times the amount of damage counters on this Pokemon. Well, obviously on Phoebus that doesn't do crap. That's only 30. It's only 20 damage at most.
Yeah,
But when you're talking about a Milotic EX with 270 HP, for 1 water energy, you can do up to 260 damage if they do not KO you back.
you know what? I didn't even think of that because everyone's just talking about the Feraligatr. But yeah, that's a nice like alternative attack route as well.
So there's this deck is super cool. It's like we said, it's a budget deck. It's only $40 right now. The entire deck can be played in the current format. This is built. This is a future proof kind of deck, so it's really really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I will not be surprised if we see this deck starting in Atlanta going forward. Like even with this being a current deck, I think this is very well primed for the future format.
Yeah, and you've already seen some people play it on different tournaments. I will say it's much better next format because you have cards like Manaphy, Canceling Cologne, a lot of ways to get around this strategy that you don't have with Journeys Together and post rotation. So, but as we said, pick up the cards now. It's cheap. When we say Pokemon is a cheap card game, this is a prime example. This is a tournament winning deck that doesn't cost much money compared to other games where I'm told there's some you have to play competitively. You got to dish out $500-$600
Oh
just
yeah,
to have a decent deck.
yeah. Like high end Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh decks can cost a lot of money for sure. So
Yeah,
That's
So
Pokemon is definitely a more budget game. It can be expensive, but it is more of a budget game. So there's that, and I love when I see a deck under $50. I've said it in many episodes. I'm a budget player. That's how I can maneuver my way through the game, and seeing this is amazing because it means I can put it together and know that one, it's future proof, which is even better.
hmm
But dropping $40 where most of that $40 is in your trainers.
hmm
Like the Pokemon are maybe $8 total for all 19 cards. It's not bad
not
at all.
even. It's like 30 cents, 39. Oh, they don't have the multipliers. But yeah, this is a nice affordable deck. If you're looking for something competitive to semi-competitive, this is a deck I would recommend. It's not a beginner friendly deck because there is a lot of forward thinking and spread and how to manipulate your damage. But if you're looking for a challenge like that, this is a good deck for that as well. I may try it out because that's a archetype I'm not too familiar with, so it will help me challenge myself as a trainer and see how I can do with that archetype. I either like the straight ahead decks, the
Hmm.
beat stick decks, or I like playing very defensively, which I'm excited for next format because this shows that defensive decks are really good too. There's one, two, three, four, five decks in the top 16 are the wall archetypes, specifically with the Farigiraf EX and the Melodic that we mentioned as well.
Yeah, the next format's going to be a lot of fun to watch. It's going to grow obviously with all post rotation formats. The first 4 to 5 months is obviously the most primitive, and then it just expands and expands and expands over the year. So it's going to be interesting. I'm excited for it. It's one of those decks. I think you said this deck has a medium skill floor. So, but with this being a future proof deck, you can struggle with it for the next month and a half to 2 months before rotation comes up. And then by the
Mm-hmm.
time rotation hits and everyone's kind of reacting to that format, you've already kind of developed the skills within the card pool to be like, you know what, this is a deck I'm comfortable with, and everyone else is trying to learn to play this deck around me. So it's always one
Yeah,
of those. It's a long term deck. It's a very good long term deck, and it will help you kind of master one card, one deck. So with that being said, of the Champions League, of talking about future proofing, let's talk about the here and now. Let's talk about what happened last weekend in Puerto Rico and how this regional and the regional from the previous weekend kind of interact with each other for what is going to be one of the international tournaments. So
yeah. So Puerto Rico, smaller of the major tournaments. I believe there's only like 300 players
yeah,
at that tournament, 52 making day two. But of course, Maridon, and won the whole thing again. So 2 weeks, two tournaments in a row. Maridon was on the top. Second place was Archaldon, which honestly I love that. That deck has been trying to make its presence known, and I think with having two two trainers in the top 8 play Archaldon, it's really solidifying its place. Like, hey, I need to be respected. I am a good deck. I'm not one of those meme weird decks anymore. Like, you need to prepare for me.
mm-hmm. I would say other than those two things, the one thing that's been catching my eye recently is Cyril Edge EX.
Yeah.
I know we profiled it on the channel about 2 months ago, and I honestly had a blast playing the deck. I saw its potential, and we're seeing it break through, and we're seeing it just crush its ceiling. There's been a lot of results with that deck recently, and low key, I think this is going to be the sleeper deck for EUIC. That's my honest opinion from seeing it. It's how it's being upwardly trending in the last couple weeks.
Yeah, I think it is the sleeper pick or slash black sheep. It's it makes a strong appearance in the online tournaments. You always see it do well,
Mm-hmm.
but it never had that performance in IRL majors until this week. So it finally got it.
Yeah, it got a top 8,
Yeah, it
and
got
then it
top
got a
8,
couple
got
other spots in the top
7.
16.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting there, and I think with what you said, that our Travelodon is being much more played and much more respected. So it just counters it. So it's
Yeah.
one of those, like, with a rise of another deck, like they're parallel, right? One rising, the other one rises with it, because if more players are going to play this deck, why not play a deck that can counter it? Makes
Yeah,
sense.
it's in a good position to really do well against a lot of the top decks. It one shots anything as long as you get enough energy in the discard. And if for some reason you're struggling with your setup, it has the Palkia as a backup attacker. And with the Palkia, you can make your Radiant Greninja a backup attacker as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to snipe something easy early on with the low HP Pokemon and hinder your opponent's setup, you have that option as well. So yeah, with the Bidoof, it helps slow it down enough to where it can actually do what it's supposed to do. So I'm glad to see that in the top. But looking at the stats for day 2, it's really the same old, same old. We're not seeing anything different. Miraidon, Gardevoir, Dragapult are the top 3 decks that converted well to day 2, with Lugia being number 4, which I'm surprised, just with Miraidon's presence now.
Mm-hmm.
But Lugia is still a good deck. It's always been powerful. It's been a victim of the weakness, because whenever Miraidon's around, you don't see much of it in the top tables.
Yeah.
But when people kind of step back from playing Miraidon, Lugia just excels.
I just don't see Miraidon going away anytime soon. Like, it's just so good. And honestly, I think a lot of players are moving away from Lugia, not only because of the weakness and the rise of Miraidon, but also in what, a month and a half's time, it's not even going to be a deck anymore. So players are
Yeah,
just trying to get away from cards that are going to be rotating hard. And I think that's also why Regidrago it just fell off a cliff. I think players are already shifting away from Drago, because why play a deck that's not going to be playable after this tournament?
well, it's not just that, but the Bidoof shuts it down so much because it relies on the item cards to set up, because you want to get your Teal Master Ogerpon in play, then use the energy switches to go onto the Ready Drago, but then you also need to use like Prime Catcher and Nest Balls, and there's too many items it needs. And with that tiny plant, the top deck goes almost away altogether. Only one person
Yeah,
made day 2.
only one day 2 of that deck. And I mean, Bidoof, obviously you're 100% right. Bidoof is such a strong card, and we talked about it. It's broken. Like, it's gonna shape a meta around itself, and Item Lock always has done that. But Regidrago has definitely been the biggest victim of that, and I think it's because of multiple factors. I think Bidoof is the biggest factor, but I think players looking ahead, unless you were a diehard Regidrago player, you're probably already pivoting to the next format already. You're trying to get those cards. You're trying to position yourself so where you're not trying to react in April, you're reacting now.
Yeah, but I will say my cloth deck is still holding strong, with the one person making day 2. It's also made top cut. It got top 4 in Merida. So I'm proud of that little crab still surviving. It's still making a presence known. So I'm glad I didn't shift away from it completely. Like, I'm not playing it at locals currently, but it's always my go-to deck, and it's
Mm-hmm.
doing better than I was expecting with rotation. Or not starting that rotation with the format, because I thought Bidoof would kill it. But there's ways around it to where it still survives, and as long as you can be the aggressor, this deck still holds a place as like a formidable deck to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's a sign of a good deck, right? The adaptability to two formats, right? From set to set, you kind of see it adapt and evolve, and it has. Its core strategy was very item reliant. You can't get away from that, but it's just trying to find ways to where it can just survive and kind of get to the mid game. Because once it's in the mid game, it's set. It's the early
Yeah.
game that really needs to get out of the blocks.
Mm-hmm. But other than that, nothing really too surprising. Charizard's still around, even though we all thought it will go away. It's that strong of a deck.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not totally surprised that it's still chugging along. But with that, with Merida, with Puerto Rico, with those two Latin American tournaments, now we're going across the pond to London for EUIC, the European International Championships. How do these tournaments, granted being major tournaments, are on the smaller side compared to the North American and European regionals? How can we take these results and transfer that to preparation for EUIC? What should players be expecting? What should we as viewers be anticipating to watch out for when this tournament goes on tomorrow?
Yeah, so obviously, Miraidon, you prepare for. If you are a competitor, you're preparing for Miraidon. You can't ignore that deck. You're preparing for Gardevoir. You can't ignore that deck. You're preparing for Dragapult. You're preparing for Raging Bolt, Archelaudon. Those are probably the 5 decks I would say make sure you have a favorable or neutral spread against. Minimum. Either you're playing one of those 5 decks or you have a deck that can play against those decks in a 50-50 or better. And if any of those 5 are less than a 50-50, you are taking a strategic loss. If I was a competitor, that's how I would be setting up myself and picking my deck selection that way. In terms of what my gut feeling is telling me after seeing the results over the last 2 to 3 weeks, I think, like I said earlier, I'm going to stick to it. Surlage is going to be the sleeper pick for this tournament. I think we're going to see a very formidable amount of those making day 2. I think there is a good chance that one of them will make it into the top cut bracket. Maybe not top 8, but into that top cut asymmetrical bracket that we know that's probably going to exist at a tournament this size. And that is where I would be very intrigued as a non-playing observer, be like, well, how does this deck do? Because I can see it on an upward trend among results recently.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Dragapult, Gardevoir, Archelaudon, Miraidon, everyone should be aware of those decks. If you have a loss to any of them, your deck may not be the correct pick. However, go with what you're comfortable with. Like for me, if I would have went to EUIC, I probably would still be on the cloth train. I'm super comfortable. I know my outs. However, I do know Gardevoir is very hard for me. So that's a risk I'm worth taking just because I don't have time to really grind out another deck. But that's just me. The players actually at EUIC probably took the time and practice, and they know their lines, or theoretically they will know. So Cerulege is the black sheep of this tournament. I think it's gonna come out of nowhere. Whoever a strong trainer is going to take this and go either top 16 or to the asymmetrical top cut. I do agree with you on that. But yeah, it's going to be a very fun tournament. We're excited to see how it turns out. The prizing of $25,000 automatic Worlds invite. It's going to be a fun weekend. If you're from the North American region, it's going to be early for us. So if you want to wake up at 4 a.m. to watch it, I'll probably be doing that because I wake up that early anyway, knowing me. But yeah, I'm excited just to take this all in, see how this format, because this is one of the now we got a couple more tournaments in this format before we go to post rotation.
We do.
But this is like the middle of the format for us. The results from EUIC is going to kind of determine what we see at Vancouver, what we see in Stockholm. I believe that's before that too. With the 3 or 4 turns we have left before rotation. So I'm excited. Yeah. Expect a lot more ride on.
It's going to shape the last four regionals of the format. You're exactly right, because there's one in Vancouver, there's one in Brazil, there's one in Stockholm, and one in Brisbane. So each cluster, each region of TPCI will have a regional after EOIC. So not only are we going to see people react to it, we're going to see regions react to it. So it's going to be very
Mhm.
interesting to see how that paves the way for the last month of the season, about the last month of this pre-rotation format that we're in before, like you said, Atlanta in April, that is going to be the first post-rotation. So it's going to be interesting. EUIC, ICs in general, always fun to watch. It's a really good spectacle. The production value is always really there, high up there when Pokemon does these tournaments. So if you are interested in watching the video game or trading card game, definitely follow their Twitch channels or even their YouTube channels. That's where they will both be. And then on Sunday on the main Pokemon channel, you're going to see all the finals of all the age groups. And it's going to be really fun to see how the junior, senior, and master division interpret the meta, and you'll be able to see three really high quality matches if you're interested in just have time on that Sunday. There you go, kind of deal.
Yeah,
So
and another cool thing is for us watching from home. If you connect your trainer account to your Twitch,
mhm.
if you have that, you can get drops. So you can get reward for watching the tournament into your live account. I believe they're giving away some evolution
It's
stuff.
always a really nice full art trainer. It's always going to be
Yeah,
a SIR Pokemon that's relevant. So if you have those accounts and have those drops, absolutely. They usually sometimes just drop a code and you just have to find it on social media. But it's going to be an interesting tournament. It's going to be a very good tournament to watch. Yeah, like you said, ICs are always that quality. So if you have time, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, pop it on. Like I said, this is on Pokemon's Twitch channels and YouTube channels. And if you ever just don't catch it because of time zones, go on the YouTube channel, play the VOD. Just
yeah,
randomly pick time slots and kind of see how it's happening, see how other people are playing it, and kind of that will be your way to kind of test the waters. Absolutely. So, with that being said, Dean,
hmm
let's continue our little mini series here on how to train a rogue. So, last week we talked about Pokemon search. We
we
talked about
did.
how to get Pokemon out and how to like that efficiency piece. But obviously, in decks, there are item cards that are more than just searching out Pokemon. So,
Yeah, so obviously we need our Pokemon out because if you don't have your Pokemon out, you're not doing the attacks, and if you're not attacking, unless you have the alternate win condition deck, you're not you're not winning the game. So yes, the ball search is important, but the when you play a deck, a big key concept to really master and familiarize yourself with is the term resource management.
and it's not
So
just it's just not an attack on Oranguru. It's an actual thing you have to manage.
yeah, so it's something you need to learn how to use the items, use the cards in your deck, and best utilize them in however you see fit.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just play a very straightforward beat stick deck. Once you're set up, you're fine, and you're just drawing cards just to have just on the off chance you need them. There's some decks where you need to go through your whole entire deck to get your board set up, and you're relying on recycling cards. There's whatever resource management means to you for that deck. You need to have a very firm grasp on how that works for you.
Yes, and let's peel that back, right? Let's peel the onion on resource management a little bit. So when we say resource management, we're using that as a broad term because every deck kind of utilizes that a little differently. Resources are your deck, your prizes, your hand, and your discard pile. Those are four areas of where your resources are going to lie.
Mm-hmm.
And every deck uses those areas very differently. They're back in older formats, the current expanded. There's a lot of decks that love living out of the discard pile. Night March. A current version of this would be actually Sirlu Edge. Loves living out of discard pile because they want the resources in the discard pile because that's where their damage calculations are.
Same thing with Ancient Box. That's another deck where you want those ancient cards in your discard, because that's based on how much damage you're doing.
Yeah, so when it comes to managing that, you have to manage it very differently based on how you want to go about it. But the most common way of managing your resources is recursion. Is how do you get your resources back to where you need them to be? How are you doing that? Are you putting resources from your discard pile back into your deck, like with a super rod? Are you putting them into your hand like a night stretcher? Are you putting them on straight onto the board because of cards like Glass Trumpet or Power Hourglass? There's so many different ways that item cards allow you to manipulate those areas in order to reestablish or to further establish your board in order for you to get toward your win condition.
Yeah, so this week we're specifically targeting item cards. There are some supporters that do that too, but the items are the ones that you'll really use when it comes to resource management, because you can play multiple items in one turn versus a supporter you can only do once per turn unless you have some weird effect where you can do more. There's very limited ways of doing more than one. So with item cards, one of the big important cards that a lot of decks will utilize is Super Rod.
Mm-hmm.
It's been around for a very long time, and it's just a very consistent way to get the key energy and or Pokemon back into your decks. That way you can use cards like Nest Ball, Ultra Ball, Tera Ball, whatever, Pokemon Surge to get the Pokemon out, or even just use cards like Earthen Vessel to get the energy out. So it's a way to resource what you have already used, or even just purposely discard through an Ultra Ball or other means, just so you can recycle those 60 cards over and over again. Because during a game, the amount of cards you're really looking at can be greater than 60 just because of how you're reusing certain cards over and over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And resource management isn't just putting cards into the deck so you can get them back. Sometimes resource management is I'm about to deck out because either you went super aggressive and you dug really hard, or your opponent has a mill strategy and is really basically putting your deck into the discard pile for you, and you have to avoid you have to avoid a losing condition by refilling your deck, by making sure that you still have a deck to draw from at the beginning of your turn so you can get your win condition. So the resource management is more than just managing the resources to continue what you're doing. Sometimes it's managing the resources so you can survive. So that's another way, like you said, Super Rod's a really good example of putting cards back into your deck. That way you can just continue the game.
Yeah, and another way to think about when you build decks too, you can use cards like Super Rod, Pal Pad, stuff that recycles certain type of cards. You can make them one-ofs in your deck. For instance, most decks only play one of Fezandipiti EX. You don't really need to. You can only use flip the script once, so you only put one in there. Well, what happens if your opponent targets that card early on? It's in your discard. So you play cards like Super Rod, Night Stretcher, whatever Pokemon recovery from your discard to either your hand or to your deck. That way you can just use the same card over and over again, and it helps eliminate space in your list so you can put in more consistency cards or other cards that go with your strategy better. So we talked about recycling just so you can play the game some more. We talked about recycling just so you can survive the game. And then now we're talking about recycling so you can best build the deck the way you see fit, and that can accomplish your goal. So there's multiple reasons why you use certain consistency cards in your deck. Is not just about one of these strategies. It's really about all of them all together.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you used the term perfectly. It's consistency pieces. So these cards are in your deck. We always talked about all 60 cards have value. And all 60 cards bring value in different situations. So in your opening hand, you may have a card that you really like a Blood Moon Ursaluna or a Radiant Charizard, but they only have value, or their highest values at the end of the game. and you're like, what do I do? Do I sit in the? Do I have this resource in my hand the entire game, or do I Ultra Ball it away? Do I discard it away another way so I can just gain access to a card that's going to bring me more immediate value? And then later in the game, you do your recursion, so your Super Rod, your Night Stretcher, and you're like, you know what? I know where this card is. It's in my discard pile. Let me put it into an area where I need it now, my deck or my hand. That way
Mm-hmm.
I can take and maximize its value in the moment that you need it. So it's going to sound weird, but sometimes you just need to ditch your hand and get more cards, to thin your
Mm-hmm.
deck out, to see more cards. Like, it's not unheard of for some decks to touch 20 cards in a turn, and that's okay. You're not wasting resources by doing that. You're maximizing your resources because now you know where your resources are. When your resources are in your deck, knowing they're in the deck is great. But when they're in the deck and they're private knowledge and you can't manipulate when you're going to get those, that's sometimes a problematic area because then you're just you're in heart in a card mode, right? You're just hoping that top card gives you what you want. Well, when it's in the discard pile, you have more accessibility to knowing how you can do it because you get to control when you grab those. Sometimes when they're in the deck, you don't get to control that.
Exactly. And I think the word control is very important when we talk about resource management too. I was actually watching a video of a top Australian player, and he was recounting his experience at LAIC, and he was playing a deck that had Chorus Tenacity. I believe it was Terapagos. He was playing Terapagos Dusknoir, and he was going against Regidrago. Well, Regidrago has a card called Kiram, which if you have a card with Chorus in its name, it only needs one energy to attack. And he had to give up that Chorus Tenacity very early on, and he knew that was very risky. But he was actually able to win the game by controlling what his opponent can do by playing Palpad, getting or not sorry, he wasn't playing Palpad. He actually played a 1/1 Regidrago V-Star in his list, did the Legacy Energy, and through that, grabbed that one copy of Color Tenacity he had in the deck, put it back in his hand, and now the Regidrago player can't use Kiram to attack for one energy. So it's not you're not always controlling what you can do, but it helps you control what your opponent can do as well. Because you're taking resources that either will disrupt what they're doing or help them stop their strategy as well. So the word control, I think, is very important in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes control has a negative connotation to it, right? When you hear control in trading card games, it's more of the control archetype, right? Where those players are preventing you from doing what you want to do for a very long term piece of play. And sometimes when you hear control, you just kind of cringe, like, oh, I don't like control decks. I'll be honest, I don't, but I respect them and I know they exist.
Mm-hmm.
And my toxic trait is I never counter them. I do not ever build a deck that will counter control because I that's a choice I make. And if I run into control into a tournament, I'm taking the L. But that's a choice I'm making as a deck builder, right? We're talking about how do we build a deck for the matchups we want to play and for the matchups we know we're going to play. And being able to control what you can do through your resource management, through those item cards, through setting up your board, being able to do it repetitively over and over again. Again, that consistency value. We're able to enjoy what we do and make the choices that we want to do with our decks. So, with that being said, we talked about resource management. Let's transition this and kind of show it off a little bit with the deck of the week that Dean you actually wanted to pilot and lead this week.
Yeah. So with the concept of resource management, I wanted to build a deck that kind of maybe overemphasize how you manage your resources in your discard and in your deck, and make it to your advantage. So with the theme of the evolutions, I actually thought Umbreon was a very good example of this. So Umbreon is a darkness type Pokemon, stage 1, evolves from Eevee or EVEX with that ability. 280 HP, has 2 attacks. The first attack is Darkness and Double Colorless for 160, and then your opponent's active Pokemon is confused. But the one attack I really wanted to focus on, and it was really fun to do, is Onyx. So for a Lightning, Psychic, and Darkness energy, you discard all the energy on that Pokemon, and you just take a prize card.
So just, well, I say not a freeze prize card because you're discarding 3 energies, but no damage needed. You just take a prize.
Yeah. You just have to take a prize. It's actually really fun to get to that point in the game. But as you mentioned, we have to discard that energy. And it being a Tera Pokemon has that weird energy requirement.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we get that energy back on? Well, we play cards that help manage our resources. As you mentioned earlier, a tool card that is very important to this list that I made is the Powerglass. So at the end of your turn, if the Pokemon that have this tool card attached to is in the active, you can attach a energy from your discard back to that Pokemon. So yes, you discarded 3 energy, but now you're gaining 1 back. And then I play for the support mon. I put Blissey EX in this list, and I did that because I wanted to utilize both the Happy Switch ability that Blissey has, so that way you can move the energy around your board as however you see fit, and pair that with Glass Trumpet, because Umbreon EX is a Tera Pokemon. So you can Glass Trumpet to your bench colorless Pokemon, aka Blissey, and then Happy Switch that back to the Umbreon, and you can either do the Onyx attack again and grab another prize card, or you can just attack head on and do the 160 with Moon Mirage.
And you can also you can power Hourglass onto an Eevee, can't you? Before you evolve it up to an Umbreon.
Glass Trumpet, but
Glass Trumpet, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so as long as it's a colorless Pokemon and you have a Tera in play, you can put that Pokemon, those energy, however way you can. You also play Bibarel as help for your draw support. So between the Glass Trumpet, the Blissey, I also play Dark Patch because Umbreon's a dark Pokemon. It made perfect sense. I think I used it once in my testing with it, but it's still another resource to get the energy from the discard onto your board once again.
Yeah, Dark Patch was such a good card when it was originally debuted because of Darkrai, and that was just, it made it such a strong card. Since it's been reprinted, it really hasn't brought the value that people remembered it for, and it just, like you said, it makes sense to have it in the deck, but sometimes it doesn't bring the value you're hoping for. It's very situational.
It is. And then with this list specifically, since we were talking about resource management and recycling and recursion, I thought it was really fit to put the Max Rod A-Spec in this list. Yeah, you can probably play the Sparkling Crystal, but with the Max Rod, you can bring back up to 5 in any combination of Pokemon and Basic Energy right into your hand. So if you're missing that evolution and that's in your discard, you can get that with the Max Rod. You can get your Bibarel back. You can get the last energy you need to attack back. So I thought for this list, it was fitting. Could there be better A-Specs for this? Absolutely. You can probably play a Prime Catcher. Secret Box probably is a good idea. Like I said, Sparkling Crystal is probably a good idea. But with building something from scratch, I wanted to showcase something you don't normally see all the time. And this is a new A-Spec, and I wanted to give its spotlight. I used it in one of my games, and it actually saved me a lot and actually helped me win the match. But yeah, there's so many ways you can manipulate your resources with this deck list. We'll have this in the show notes, and on Friday we'll have the video uploaded onto our YouTube channel, so that way you can see how I was able to utilize everything to win my matches that I did. I will say, practicing before recording the matches versus recording the matches, where I had completely different experiences.
Yeah, you were texting me. You're like, "Man, this is rough," and then you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna get some matches on." And on Sunday night, I get an email. I'm like, "I'm done." I'm like, "What do you mean you're done?" Because I had a better session today. I'm like, I can tell.
Yeah, it was it was like that with the Sylveon deck too. Like play testing, I'm like, oh man, this is rough. I just hope I can show the concept of the idea. And then I play it, I'm like, whoa, I just did really well with it. It's either the timing or something with the recording magic. I just get very good games with it. But yeah, with this list, I actually had a really fun time making the video for this. The results did catch me by surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Spoiler or warning, this isn't a super competitive list. These are just ways to showcase how to become a better deck builder and ultimately becoming a better trainer. If take this list, if you want to optimize it and find a way to make it better, by all means do that. Let us know what improvements you will make to it. I'm still learning as a deck builder through this series, as I mentioned before. It's really benefiting me. As I mentioned, it helped me with that bulk deck building challenge I did last week at League. So hopefully you enjoyed the Umbreon Blissey deck. It's a great way to learn resource management and how to really use recursion to your advantage. Just hopefully you don't hit weakness like I did for some of my games.
Yeah, that grass weakness now is becoming more prevalent,
Yeah.
and that's a mechanic in the game that's been hotly debated. Is should weakness be double or should it be plus 30? That's a conversation for a different day. So definitely enjoy playing those decks. Definitely enjoy, like, honestly, I'm enjoying the fact that like you and I split the evolutions almost 50-50, and now we're crafting these decks around these concepts and these ideas, and really grappling with what we're doing with this evolution series that's being paired up with all the different conversations we're doing with this the How to Train a Rogue deck series.
Yeah, I know. Even before we recorded, you and me were talking about the next two decks we're going to build, and it's like, how can we take these concepts and use the evolutions? Because I like this challenge. Like, yeah, we can probably find another Pokemon that can do better with these concepts, but the fact that we can tie it with the Prismatic Evolution series, I think is just making this even more enjoyable. It's kind of stretching our abilities on how we conceptualize different ideas as well. If you all have any challenge ideas for us for future episodes, shoot them our way. We want to hear them. If there's something you want us to see when it comes to building rogue decks, we're all ears. We want to see your comments, and we want to just provide some good deck battle experiences for y'all and help us really become better trainers too. So
Yeah.
let us know. But as we close out today's episode, as we mentioned, next week it's Pokemon Day, next Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
We would have done the conversation on next week's episode, but by the time this comes out, Pokemon Day will already happen. Didn't really make any sense. So we're like, let's talk about now. What are some predictions or some, I guess, wants you want to see from the Pokemon Direct or from the Pokemon community with our quote unquote national holiday for next week?
So two things what I want. First is I'm hoping that we get a mini expansion in Pocket. There's been rumors, but nothing ever confirmed. So I'm interested to see if Pocket's going to get any, like, that mini expansion that everyone's expecting. And second, I just want a date for Pokemon Legends ZA. Like, I don't know how else to say it with a straight face. I know a lot of people in the community. It's been 1 calendar year since we've been shown this game, and we have no information on it whatsoever. I just want a date. I don't care for game footage. They could just show. All they could do is just flash a date in the screen, and I'd be happy. That's all I want. And I think there's a lot of players who are just going to be like, just give me a date. Like, they would love a trailer. They would love footage. We just want to know when we're going to get the game. There's so many players that have just been begging and waiting. What about you? What are you expecting for Pokemon Day?
So on top of like with you with Legends EA. I don't necessarily need a date. I just want some info. Give me something. As you mentioned, it's been a full year until we got that last announcement or first announcement. It's first and last. Like that was the
It's the
only time
only
they did.
announcement we've gotten.
Yeah, we didn't get anything at Worlds, which is
Nope.
surprising. So I just want info. I want to see even a game footage. A date will be nice. I just want to see something. Help me manage my expectations with this game because I want to know: am I getting this on the Switch or am I getting this on the Switch 2? Do I need to invest more into the Switch 2 now, or should I wait? So that's one thing. And then I just want to see something fun with the mobile games. I don't play any of the mobile games other than I play Go, kind of played Pocket a little bit, not as much as you. But I love seeing how they introduce new mechanics into like the Cafe Remix, into Masters EX, into Sleep. It's more of an entertainment thing for me. So I always enjoy seeing how they bring those games more.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like we get that a lot with the TCG, we get that a lot with Go, but those other mobile games kind of get put to the back burner. You don't necessarily see a lot with it. So it's nice to see how they update it and refresh it. So that's my other Pokemon Day prediction. Um, Selfishly, I want something with TCG, but we get enough of those announcements throughout the year. Pokemon Day really isn't for that.
I
But
can't
I'm
remember the
excited for
last time we got a TCG uh,
it.
announcement during Pokemon Day, during the Pokemon Presents. I honestly can't remember, like, because we just got the trainer Pokemon drop during Worlds, so it's one of those. Worlds is when we get that information. TCG gets a lot of love at Worlds. I just don't
Yeah.
remember the last time we got a TCG announcement during Pokemon Day.
I think last year they announced the date for Worlds at Pokemon during Pokemon Day, but we already have that info now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
That's
not
right,
sure
because
what would be.
yeah, because they've announced the next 2 years of Worlds, so like they kind of lost
Yeah.
their opportunity.
Yeah, but we'll see. I'm excited. I'm going to 2 Pokemon Day events at leagues.
Mm-hmm.
I'm helping our buddy Joe do a learn to play at the at For Honor and Glory, and then I'm going to my local shop on Thursday, the actual Pokemon Day, and we have our monthly challenge during that, and we're going to do some giveaways and all that. So I'm really excited for that. I have a fun deck I want to bring, assuming my cards come in. I've ordered them. I'm just waiting for them to come in the mail. I actually have 2 deck ideas I'm bouncing with. So another fun road deck for me to bring to the challenge. I'm not going to be super serious again,
Yeah.
but I'm excited. It'll be a fun day, as you tell. We both love Pokemon. Um, but yeah, with that, anything else before we close out the episode?
No, it's a very exciting weekend for Pokemon. Like we said, EUIC is this weekend. There's Pokemon Go in-person events in Taipei City and Los Angeles for Unova Tour. And then a week's time from now is Pokemon Day. So there's a lot that's going to happen in the next 7 to 10 days from Pokemon. So I'm super excited for that. Need to manage my expectations, obviously, but I'm just excited to kind of see what happens. It's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah, I'm excited too. UIC is going to be fantastic. I'm sure whatever news we get with Pokemon Day is going to be great. But with that, thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Road Deck Chronicles. Let us know about the new overlay we have, about any YouTube ideas, anything to help this podcast and channel out. We're all ears on it. We just want to create the best experience for you all. So, with that, have fun watching EUIC, and remember, enjoy playing those sneaky decks.
See you guys.